So since we talked about RG, I also have here my next session, which is about applying different tactics to reaching bettors in North America and Europe. I'm going to be the devil's advocate over here because we were talking about responsible gaming and how to communicate with players responsibly, but we will now going to touch base on it on a marketing level. So I have with me here Jenny Liu, General Manager North America of OtherLevels. Hi, Jenny. Could you give a short introduction?
Hi, yes, thank you. Well, firstly, a big thank you for the invitation, Zoltán, and great to speak here at the Gaming Americas meetup. So a little bit of a short introduction about me. I've probably been in the gaming industry for about 15 years, all around marketing. So I started in affiliate marketing, actually started with one of the last panelists, Alan Petrelli, over there. So it's been a while. So I started in acquisitions marketing with affiliates, and then mostly in Europe. About 4 years ago, I decided to sort of really focus on the US market. And that was around the time when the US market was really opening up. So I moved over to New York, head up gaming sales for a leading customer retention marketing platform. And then just over a year ago, joined OtherLevels as the general manager of North America.
Thank you so much. And we have here your colleague, Hugo Vint, business development and growth for OtherLevels in Europe. Hugo.
Hi, Zoltán. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's our pleasure.
So I am the business development director for OtherLevels in Europe. And my background has been predominantly in email and in other predominantly kind of retention-based activities. I've worked for OtherLevels for 5 years, working mainly with European operators, particularly sports books, really focusing on how they can retain their customers better. But obviously, we also help them reach customers. So really, it's a question of kind of looking at how they can reach and retain more of their customers, wherever they happen to be based.
Yeah, that's great. I hope that you've seen our earlier panel where we talked about responsible gaming and how to retain that customer for life.
I did, and I thought that whole conversation was incredibly interesting, particularly trying to find this balance between responsible gaming and ultimately kind of actually undermining the whole premise of the gambling industry and how operators can really affect that change, if at all.
Exactly.
So I have a feeling we may touch on that again in this session. But,
definitely. Yeah, since we are targeting 2 continents, it's time to add the 3rd continent, add Europe, the European continent as well to the discussion. So I will be asking a couple of questions where Jenny will reply about North America and Hugo will reply about Europe. So what are the differences that you see between bettors in North America versus those in Europe? So Jenny, if you would like to go first on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first differences will be in the sports themselves. So there's definitely different types of sports. And I think maybe a little bit biased here, but in Europe, there's a predominant focus on some very key sports, mainly football, soccer, as it's known here in North America. So whereas American sports, there's NFL, which is the predominant one, but I think you'll find difficulty finding an American sports fan that's a fan of just one sport. Basically, they're a fan of anything that's sports. So you've got the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college basketball, college football. You've got like a whole, boxing, you've got
NASCAR,
like MMA, everything, basically. Yep. Anything where, they're running around and there's some competition. So there's just a lot of different sports. And then the sports themselves have different types of actions. Like there's a lot more sporting moments in American sports. So it's, the score's a lot higher. There's a lot more scoring action going on. It's not like a 0-0 game or like, 1-0 game type of thing. But there's a lot more things that are happening, I think. And it's also, I think in Europe, it's very social, but I think in America, it's sort of like, systemic, like from when they're in school, and that's where you have all these like college football and college basketball fans, like, it's this whole systemic system where they're sort of grown up in sports, their family, they're watching it like constantly. So I think one, the sports themselves are different, and then two, the bettors themselves are quite different because it's a different market. You've got such, I think in Europe, people have grown up with betting. So it's something that they understand a bit better. In America, it's very different. You've got ones that have bet before, that use the offshore books that to bet. There's ones that go to casinos. People have their bookies, like their traditional physical bookies that they go visit, they go see and make bets with. And then you've got the ones that play fantasy as well, which isn't really sports betting, but I think they come with a lot more experience when they go into sports betting. And then you've got the novice ones, the ones that is like, what's going on? Like, this is interesting. And starting to learn about it. And I think, and so there's so many types of bettors, I think, in America on different levels, whereas I think in Europe, there's a lot more sort of standardization of that.
Yeah, and we'll see what Hugo has to say about that.
Well, so firstly, I'm utterly terrified about speaking on behalf of Europe as some kind of homogenous place. So I think just to kind of break it down, and before I have kind of, angry and irate kind of, Greeks or Danes or whatever on the line. I mean, I think certainly what is true is that generally speaking, the European market, is far more mature. We have decades worth of gambling, particularly sportsbook gambling throughout Europe. And what is also certainly true is that soccer, football, is the, if you like, the predominant entry sport, and remains the predominant sport for many people. Where I think it sort of slightly then diverges is that clearly each European nation then has also a range of other additional sports that people engage with. Some of which are pretty hyper local or certainly regional. But that certainly I think betting is deeply ingrained within the European psyche. And I think there are some sort of real cultural differences here, not just as Jenny says, not just the range of sports or the number of kind of, if you like, in-play events. But I think there are some other cultural differences, which is that, betting is seen as very normalized within Europe. You'll see a lot of, high street shops, or in other, outside of the UK, you'll see, effectively high street bars with gambling and betting. And you'll see people engaging in betting in lots of different ways, both mobile and, on premise. So it's a deeply ingrained mindset. And I think, because of that, it's slightly different to the US. I think, certainly in the UK, we've never had kind of glossy sports bars with deep plush seating, food and drink, huge wide screens. I mean, anyone who's ever been to a UK bookies knows that, they're going to get a very different type of experience.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not making any particular statements. I'm just suggesting it's a very different environment. So I think there are some big cultural differences, and I think some of those cultural differences are what's going to become quite interesting in terms of how US operators and European operators actually go on to acquire more customers.
Got it. Yeah, interesting thing. I really like this comparison between North America and Europe. And let's talk about the maturity of the types of betting. What is the difference in betting maturity or types of betting between North America and Europe? Jenny, once again, you can go first. So we have the North American one first.
Sounds good. So similar to sort of the previous panel where they talk about sort of the gold rush and the speed to market, that's basically where the focus is on right now is speed to market. How do we get bettors? How do we acquire bettors? So a lot of it is on acquisition and not on the retention side. So on the acquisition side, it's like, how do we get someone to come bet with us? They may or may not know about betting. Easiest way is to throw promotions at them, bonuses, free bets, risk-free bets, etc. So this is the whole marketing sort of bonanza that everyone's been talking about, where you can't go to New Jersey, you can't go to Colorado without seeing like 5,000 billboards from gambling operators thrown at you about where the best bonuses are, and basically for you to just sign up with them. I think those operators that have had a little bit more time and starting to look at maybe customer lifecycle marketing, sort of like the basic retention marketing that you need to do, looking who are your new customers, who are your active customers, maybe some customers that starting to churn, how do we get to reactivate those? What do we do? Like those basic strategies. And I think the vast majority of people are still sort of on that very sort of acquisition focused marketing, and even just their marketing, like how they reach the customers. Like even though the majority of their customers may be betting on the phone, they're probably not even doing that much mobile marketing right now. They're probably still focused on email marketing as their main marketing channel too. So I think in terms of just like how they reach their customers and how they speak to their customers is still sort of that, let's focus on acquisition, and retention comes sort of like a very far second. I think where they're going to have to get to is on the retention and engagement side. So, at some point they need to stop, they can't be spending all that money, giving them risk-free bets and giving them the promotional dollars and everything, not just from like a profitability standpoint, but also from a responsible gambling standpoint, where there's going to be a crackdown on the type of marketing that they're going to be able to do. So I think the focus will get there. It's just not there right now.
Got it. I think it's in contrast in Europe, right, Hugo, on the good old European continent?
Well, so I think, again, just to go back to this kind of notion of kind of Europe, is that I think almost we probably have to start sort of dividing Europe up and saying there are really kind of global operators, not just pan-European, but they are really kind of global operators who just happen to have been born out of Europe. And then I think there is a kind of almost a separate tier of local operators within European geo markets. So I think and that's certainly something that again is reflective of obviously this much more mature marketplace. So you have perhaps a handful of pan-European operators who have a footprint maybe under many different joint ventures and different names, but effectively they're competing across lots of different markets, but with a very solid product proposition. And then you have lots of local players who are effectively just playing in that local market. And I think one of the things that perhaps is odd about Europe, and just sort of going back really to this whole notion, obviously, of regulation, legislation, and taxation issues, is that certainly if you look at markets like the UK, the result of all of this regulation and heavy taxation and so on is that you get the emergence of much more consolidation within the marketplace. You get many smaller operators having to move out because it's simply no longer possible. And it really becomes then just a handful of very large players who can bear the cost of doing business within these regulatory environments. So I think that's certainly the emergence of those big kind of, if you like, super brands across Europe is something that I think we'll continue to see, except in those local markets where local operators with a big high street presence are again actually find themselves in a very good position, because conversely, all of the restrictions on TV advertising, on sponsorship, and all the other restrictions on the bigger players trying to move into those markets actually means it's a great marketplace for the smaller local players, because they've still got a name on every high street, and that allows them to start obviously moving people from on-premise retail stores into their online apps. Yeah. So I think there is there are lots of different things going on depending on whether you're in Spain or Italy, where perhaps if you are a well-established high street presence, you're actually okay with the restrictions and the regulations on mass advertising, because you're actually forcing out some of these bigger pan-European players. Yep. But equally, if you're a UK entity, perhaps looking at the UK marketplace, the cost of doing business is going to get higher, and that impacts competition, right? Smaller, nimble, new startups, competitors all tend to fall by the wayside, and you wind up with a handful of behemoth players who dominate that market. And I think how that then translates into marketing is that for those bigger players, clearly the emphasis for them is on constant and continuous product update and the quality of their product in order to retain high value players, because ultimately your share of wallet and your profitability is really all about your ability to retain those high value players, because in effect government regulation and everything else means that really you increasingly don't want that many casual bettors who may be problematic or have GAM care kind of needs. What you actually want is to focus on people who generate profit, who are highly sophisticated, and who come back and place bets very regularly, where there is a strong element of profitability.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarities within the US market and the European market, because there's also a state-by-state regulation as we have here in Europe, and which will intros the next question, because traditionally gambling has been in a physical location in America. It has been the same thing in Europe, and in some countries it still is, and such as casinos also were just physical location in many states, as they still are. Sports betting is still based around physical locations in some parts of Europe, and in the states in the US.
Yeah.
So how has that influenced the sports bettor compared to the European sports bettor? So in contrast with the US bettor. So who would like to start first for this question? Jenny.
I can start. Just in terms of in the US, I think there wasn't sports betting so much before, and I think in some states they've tied it down to a physical casino, or a physical location. So in some states, like in Tennessee, it's online sports betting only, but in other states, it's tied down to a physical, or you have to register
land-based
location. Exactly. So and I think it comes down to that casino experience that people are used to. So when you go to a casino, it's not, you go to a large location, it's an entertainment facility. You're there to see entertainment. There's a lot of lights, there's a lot of action going on. So I think there's a little bit of that they're trying to replicate with a physical sports book as well. So when you go to a sports book in a casino, or you go to one of those sports book in Vegas, it's the big flashy lights, multiple screens, like large screen TVs showing multiple sports. You have food, you have drinks, you have booths, you watch the sports, you eat, you drink there, you bet. It's an entertainment facility. You go there with friends. It's very social. So that's sort of like a really big difference. And even in places where like in Washington, where you can sort of bet, it's not a casino, but it's still physical location that you go betting. It's the same thing. It's a social experience. People go there, you bet. Even if you're not tied down to like a location, you're still tied in the US, you're still tied down regardless to some sort of geolocation where that's a state, the entire state, or that's a, like a zone that you need to be around, or even like if you're inside a casino, it may be certain places in the casino. You may not need to be physically betting on a machine, but you could bet on your phone. You still have to be within a certain zone to bet on. So there's a lot of restrictions in terms of where you bet, but I think it comes down to sort of having that atmosphere that, like, if you need to be somewhere, if you need to physically be in a retail location or a land-based location, the atmosphere is of that very social sort of big screen, like similar to a casino type of atmosphere.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Hugo.
Yeah. So again, I think this is going to depend on where you are in Europe. I mean, I think one of the things that has been surprising about the UK, and again, some of the kind of restrictions around FOBD terminals and all the rest of it, and the impact that then had on retail closures is the remarkable lack of noise, really, from people within government about the impact on retail spaces. And whilst that may not necessarily be the same in, say, Spain or Italy, it may not necessarily be having the same impact as yet in some other parts of Europe. It's clear that kind of European regulation, oddly enough, appears to be almost going against the social side of gambling, ironically,
yeah.
and also appears to be incredibly callous towards obviously job losses within the retail gambling space. So what you then have is this idea of apparent acceptance for mobile gambling as a very individualistic pursuit, and a very individualistic pursuit which also can take place either with a second screen or within a social environment. And I think, again, in terms of just relating this back to kind of marketing acquisition, I think one of the most interesting things is seeing the development, perhaps in the States, between the gambling operators, the media companies, and the teams and the franchises themselves, and that very kind of symbiotic relationship that US operators are seemingly entering into. Whereas in Europe, I think often that relationship has been slightly distant. In other words, it's been operators attempting to, if you like, buy audience share and eyeballs through sponsorship, or by buying those audience share and eyeballs via TV advertising or social or whatever. And so there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, in the European market between gambling brands, media, and teams, in a way that the US appears to be looking at slightly differently. And I think in terms of that, what you're then seeing is that European operators are in a sense having to become media businesses in their own right. And I think more and more you're going to see the emergence of data and content within the product, so that gambling brands become a destination for live streaming, but also for player props, player stats. And we're seeing a lot more data and rich data going into those apps, so that effectively the operators decide to become a destination in their own right, having sort of slightly lost their ability to become a destination within the retail space, certainly for a younger generation. and therefore their mobile apps are going to have to become a media, data, and gambling experience all in one.
Got it.
Yeah.
I really like that term, buying eyeballs. All right, so we have about 4 minutes left and one question, which I would like to get some shorter answers from you guys, but
Right.
more complex ones, because we are talking about, are there different marketing tactics that are used for North American bettors versus European bettors? Once again, we will start with Jenny.
So I think there are some different tactics, but I think where it's going to evolve to later on will probably be in around player engagement. So basically, I think in the North American, I think what Hugo touched on before, with there's a lot in the US between not just the gambling operators and the players, but it's the gambling operators, the players, the media companies, the teams, the sporting leagues, etc. So a lot of that is about the engagement of the players, because it's at the end of the day, it's one ecosystem. You know, they're watching the sport, they want to be engaged with the sport. Sports betting is going to get them more engaged, so they're going to bet more, but they have to do it responsibly as well. So they also have to have the content around it, they have to have engagement, they have to have the responsibility. So there's a lot that's going to be focused around the engagement of the player, and not just necessarily marketing to the player, so like marketing promotions or posters, but how do we sort of engage the player into this whole ecosystem. So, you know, they're watching the sport, but they're also understanding if they want to bet, they have their preferences about which companies that they bet with, if they want to find out information about, you know, the players, information about the score, information about what the odds are, you know, how do they access that in an easy and convenient, accessible way, that in a channel that they want to get the information. So, you know, they don't have to go out and search for it, but it's going to come to them. So it's basically something that's just going to be, you know, part of what they do every day. If they're out in a restaurant and they want to make a bet and they want to know what the score is, and they want to know what's happening throughout, because maybe they've made multiple bets, or they want to, you know, make bets during the game, like making that accessible to them, engaging to them, and not just like pushing the whole, you know, free bets, risk-free bets to them, but just, you know, engaging them into something they're interested in a way that they would be interested to receive that information.
Thank you so much. Hugo.
I think, yeah, I agree with Jenny, but I think we're going to see the emergence of all of these data sources to provide a much more media-like experience, yeah, in-app. And I think that, you know, we will see the emergence of a lot more player stats, player props, and we will see people using this data in a way that makes them believe that they're much more expert, so that for these, you know, so that they start engaging really with live events in a much deeper way.
Got it. Thank you so much. And we are right on time. Yeah, it's been lovely to hear these approaches and hearing about how we can compare the two strategies to approach operators in North America and Europe. Really insightful. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Zoltán.
Thanks, Zoltán.